working. Hello, Rink Rats. I am your guest host, Sean Fitzgerald. Tonight is Season 8, Episode 22. We're going to have Dana Gray of the Rockford IceHogs. And where's Andy Campbell? Before we get to Dana, let's introduce the usual suspects. First off, Jimmy O'Malley, how are we doing?
We're doing good. You're doing great replacing Andy. You didn't get the episode wrong, so you're off to a hot start.
Thank you. And the Bard, Andrew Bard, how we doing?
What's going on? And you haven't mispronounced anybody's name, so you're all good.
That's good. Dana, welcome back. This is your second tour with us. How you been?
I've been great. Yeah, thanks for having me back on, guys. I was thinking about it earlier today. It's been feels like it's either been 2 weeks since then, or maybe like 2 years, but I guess it's somewhere in between. But I've been great. Season's been really, really fun. We're kind of in I'd say the throes of the grind, or maybe coming out of the grind into the playoff push now. So it's a really, really, really fun time, and glad to chat with you guys about it.
Yes, I think since the last time we've had you on, like the coaches have changed. A bunch of guys have been called up. Like it's been like a lifetime ago.
Yeah, kind of reflecting back on the season, it's almost been, I don't think you could call it 2 halves or even 4 quarters. There's the Anders Sorensen era. There's, the new head coach era. There's the era where Nazar and Slaggert were lighting up the AHL. And now we've kind of gotten into the phase of the veterans really taking over. And hopefully there's still a phase to come too of, a couple of college guys and new faces to see the roster too for a good playoff push. So yeah, it's been a ton of storylines. It's kind of crazy. It's fit all in one season, but it's certainly made it interesting, at least for year one for me.
Dana, I'm going to ask you a question off the bat that I actually was thinking about earlier. How has the team changed in your eyes from Anders to Mark Eaton?
I think the simple answer is really not a lot as far as style of play. I know that those two are in constant communication, which says a lot considering that Anders is getting used to, being a head coach in the NHL. And I know a top priority for him was making sure that Eats was comfortable and getting in the reins too. And I really appreciated that from Mark right off the jump. Actually, when he took over, he came in right and said, "Hey, this is my first coaching job. I have a lot to learn, and I'm about to hit the ground running. I'm going to be relying heavily on my assistant coaches, my video coaches, the folks up in Chicago." So I think as far as a style of play has gone, really hasn't changed a lot. And I think it's been really interesting too, because Eaton's been working with so many of these guys for a really long time. He's been watching them come up through the ranks. And I think, I don't want to speak for Kyle and company, but I'm sure that played a massive, piece of that decision to insert him into Rockford, knowing that so many of these younger prospects have a friendly face in Eaton. And he's also expressed that he really wanted to coach too. So I think it was really a win-win across the board. And I've been really impressed with, especially over the last month, how the team has been really just consistent, good hockey. There's been a few nights they'll get goal lead. There's a few nights that they play really good teams, and maybe you get a point, or maybe you come up on the other end of the straw. But there really have not been games where they've been out of it or felt like they haven't had a chance to win. And I think that says a lot, considering how much of a change in roster that there's been to the structure that we have here in Rockford, from the head coach and all the assistants and management down.
Yeah, that's great to hear, Dana. For a lot of us Blackhawks fans, probably since the Nazar and Slaggert call-ups, looking down at Rockford, a lot of people have been like, okay, which one do I look to? But with Rockford being on kind of a heater the last couple of weeks, especially with 3 wins against Iowa, a team that they desperately need to win against, who of these young Rockford players has really just stepped up in the post-All-Star break that has just really impressed you, that some fans who, maybe have turned off the TV since the Nazar and Slaggert call-up should be paying attention to?
Yeah, I think the real honest answer to start, at least over the last, month or two, has been actually the likes of guys like Zach Sanford and Joey Anderson, who I know are kind of the, more of the veteran group, but they have really carried the scoring piece of this this team over the last stretch. It's been really fun to watch. As always, Samuel Savoie is a really, really exciting talent and interesting guy that I still think is certainly trying to figure it out, in his rookie year and coming off an injury too. I don't think the point production is exactly where he'd probably want it to be, but he's someone that every night kind of shows you something a little bit different. So him and Gavin Hayes as well, who unfortunately he got injured just at the tail end of 2024 and was out, I think, just about exactly 2 months, and he's played 4 games since then. And he looks really, really confident. I was talking with him last weekend, and it's kind of his first major injury, and I think you never really know how you're going to mentally come back and get used to that, to get thrown into a game that's incredibly physical right after you just hurt something. So I've been really impressed with watching him over the last couple of weekends. He's gotten a couple of points, and then on the back end, I know it's the easy answer, but Levshinov, up until a couple of days ago when he got the call up, that was really the biggest storyline for me. I'd say about in the months of January and February is, whoa, he's really starting to get confident. He's really starting to try things, and he's really starting to use his strength. And it's almost like something clicked. I don't know if it was, working with coaches or working with the development team, or something just clicked in his mind that he kind of realized, whoa, I can really hang with guys down low and actually beat people up down low with my size and speed. And that was really, really fun to see. And I'm really glad that everyone got a chance to see that Monday night on the national stage, because I thought he was pretty damn good in his debut.
Well, that's great. Yeah, we really excited for Artie to get called up, and thanks for your input, and thanks for being on the show. And I don't know if I thanked you before. My question, you mentioned it about college kids coming and guys coming in. Are those guys, we've asked this before, are those guys eligible for the AHL playoff roster, or how does that work? Or do you know?
Yeah, so they would be. And I think, I don't want to say, too much, because frankly, I still don't know a lot about, which guys might be coming or not coming. I think hopefully there'll be a group that's going to Chicago, and hopefully a group that's going to Rockford. I think it's probably a very similar situation to what happened last year, where you saw Nazar get a few games up in Chicago. You saw Slaggert get a few games up in Chicago, and then also the likes of Ledwinski and there were a few other guys that just kind of got to have that taste. Marcel even, later stages of that season where you get some games down the stretch and into a playoff season. There were even a few guys that scored their first AHL goals technically last year in the playoffs, that would then go on and score technically their first AHL goals, at the start of this season. So that adds a really fun dynamic too. And also makes me feel that much more excited that with this team, when you look at the standings, they've got that last playoff spot right now in the Central Division. They take 5 teams, and then the 5 and the 4 play a best of 3. And it just feels like if they can hang on, which I think they will, just kind of given the picture, it feels like they really could have the makings of making a run, considering what they could get from college. And then also Colton Dock and Ethan Del Mastro were papered last Friday at the deadline, so they'll be eligible. And you start to put together the pieces: Levshinov, Korchinski, Del Mastro. It's Cavan Fitzgerald has been amazing on the back end. That's a really solid top 4 defense group. And if you sprinkle in some college kids, it could be a pretty fun playoffs, I think.
Yeah. Let me answer this question. Looking at, you mentioned the deadline which took place last Friday, and a lot of teams, almost every team has players rumored to be, coming or going, whatever the case may be. There's always a little bit of, jitters among the locker room, among players. Curious, does an AHL team like Rockford kind of feel that same mentality? Like, is there a little bit of trepidation knowing that, hey, this could be my last day or something like that?
Yeah, I think, and also I'd be happy to, Jeff. We can get to that right after.
Thank you. I butchered it the first time.
I'm sensing a backstory there. Well, for one, I think we're probably going to find out a little bit more the vibes of tomorrow and Friday. This Friday is the AHL trade deadline, and it was definitely a little bit noticeable. during the deadline. We were down in Tucson, and I think for the most part, guys, it was a pretty good place to spend the trade deadline and maybe whisk away any thoughts and fears. It didn't really seem like, though, any chatter, and just from looking at the composition of the roster, that didn't really make sense just with what the Blackhawks situation was, that,
Mhm.
they weren't going to be taking away AHL players. If anything, we thought, oh, maybe if, someone in Chicago gets moved on the return, might be a player that's at the AHL level. And
Yeah.
that's actually what we got in Aku Ratu, a guy who the Hogs were playing against in Tucson a couple of weeks ago. They got him on the Shea Weber deal. So it felt like that was always going to be the case. It was going to be coming in and not coming out. But I also think, too, it's hard to ignore the trade, the Seth Jones and Spencer Knight trade. That has its own effect throughout an entire organization when you trade for a position like that, and hopefully a number one goaltender for many years. It's going to impact the trickle down. And it's been pretty cool to see Drew Comesso, a guy that is certainly finding his game more and more throughout the AHL. Over the last 3 games, I put together the stats after, I think, Saturday night. He's got like a .950, a 1.9 goals against, and he's 3-0 with a shutout ever since that trade. And that trade went down about 45 minutes before he was making his first start since coming back from injury. So as far as a storyline coming out of the deadline, I think that's pretty cool. And that's all you could really ask for, right? You get the great player in Spencer Knight, and you've got Comesso, for whatever the reason may be, is just getting hotter and hotter.
Can never have too many goalies in an organization.
No, certainly not. Certainly not.
Yeah, Dana, I'm glad you actually brought up the Weber trade, because it kind of led into my next question about Akurati, if I'm saying that name correctly.
I think you nailed it. I asked him. I was asking him about
I knew
it
he was
yesterday,
I knew he was the younger brother of the Ratty that's currently in Vancouver.
I wasn't going to touch it, so.
Yeah. We don't let Sean pronounce names. To bring that back up, kind of a 2-part question. In, I believe, the final game of that series, Ratty was kind of involved in an interference play with Kevin Fitzgerald that did put Fitzgerald in the men's. The 2-part question is, how's Fitzgerald doing? Is he coming back soon? I saw he was on the practice ice a few days ago in a video. It looked like he was getting close to coming back. So any news on that would be great. And the second follow-up, is there any bad blood in the locker room of Ratty? I'm sure it's a hockey play. These guys are professionals. They're not going to hold them against him, especially as being a new teammate. But I'm sure that was something that a lot of people had some concern about, myself included.
Yeah, I to the first part, Fitzgerald, I think, is progressing really well. And I know when I was talking with the coaches and the training staff yesterday that it's still day to day. And Rockford plays 3 games this weekend. I don't think it would be a crazy shock if he gets back for one of them. And that would be massive, because as far as, right after it happened, I was chatting with one of our equipment managers after, he went down in that Tucson game. And it was kind of hard to think of a player that is more vital and well respected across the locker room. He's really just grown into a really incredible leader in the sense of what he does on the ice. He's been amazing for Levshinov, I think, both on and off the ice as a partner. He's been the kind of guy when Artie maybe had a couple of bad shifts or threw a blue line pass that was, 4 feet in front of him, just growing pains getting used to the pro game. He's nothing but a great attitude. And he's a pro guy that spent a lot of time with actually the Wolves down the road. So he's been perfect in that scenario. And then I think on the second part, I certainly haven't sensed any bad blood. And I frankly, just knowing Fitzgerald as a player and how respected he is and what a team guy he is, he's about the last person that I think would hold a grudge or that sort of feeling around, especially around a play like that. It's so much of an environment, from what I can tell, and the few players that have come in and come out, that in their first 24 hours, it's okay, how can we make this guy feel as comfortable as possible? And I think it only makes it better with it being Fitzgerald. But yeah, no, it was a little wild seeing that trade come in and thinking, think that might have been that penalty that was called in Tucson. But I do remember, that weekend against the Roadrunners, he's a really noticeable, right shot forward, which is not something that Rockford has a lot of. It's kind of crazy. I think on the official roster, there's 19 lefties and 8 or 7 righties, and especially not at the forward position. So that strikes a chord, and he's put up some decent points over the last couple of years at the AHL level, and he was skating in practice on the top line this week. So I'm excited to see, especially with a 3-3, what he can do, and also certainly keeping fingers crossed for Sean's brother there to get back into the lineup.
Oh,
now
no.
Irish exits me.
No, I did not. Sorry, I pressed the wrong button. I was trying to unmute myself.
He didn't like the
Thank
joke.
you. My namesake is playing well, and I love it. You mentioned the Wolves. So correct me if I'm wrong. How the standing works is 5 would play 4. So the IceHogs would play the Wolves in the first round of the playoffs. How do they stack up?
Yeah, it would be, so for that first round, it would be a best of 3. So it would be one game in Rosemont. To be clear, they're not in Chicago; they're in Rosemont. And then one game at home in Rockford, if necessary, to then have another one. As far as the season series goes, the Wolves, I think they won 6 of the first 8 actually against Rockford. They've played them hard, and they're really the one team in the Central Division that I wouldn't describe as your incredibly fast and skilled team. Maybe Iowa, but they're kind of a wild card. But when you look at the top teams in the division, Milwaukee, Grand Rapids, Texas, it's just a lot of speed. And usually when they match up against the IceHogs, I'd like to describe Rockford, I think, as a pretty fast, forward-thinking transition team as well, and they match up pretty well. But there's been a few games against Chicago where coming out of it, the sentiment has been, we have to play a different style going up against this team. They're a lot heavier. They've got some really, really talented rookies, and they've also had a lot of scenarios over the season where they've been having guys coming up and down. And with Carolina, obviously, in a playoff spot, that's something that at least I think about, just as far as looking at the standings and trying to prepare for a matchup, even a team like Texas that's been a wagon. How many of those guys turn into black aces or something like that? Milwaukee will not have that issue. It looks like with Nashville, and maybe that's putting the cart in front of the horse a little bit. But to go back to Chicago, I think they're a really heavy team. They do match up well against Rockford, and they also have pretty impressive goaltending. Spencer Martin and Dustin Tokarski, who are names that I think if anyone saw on a backup sheet in the NHL at a game right now, probably wouldn't bat an eye against. They've also got a youngster, Ruslan Hijev, who's been pretty impressive too. So when you look to goaltending and heaviness in the playoffs, those are obviously 2 big things. But I'm still hopeful that I think if Rockford is able to get onto a 5th spot, they've played Chicago better and better as the season has gone on. And it is also interesting too, having that best of 3 series, because you can play a great 120 minutes and hey, you're on to the next round. So that'll be interesting to see for sure.
Going quickly back to Levshinov, you mentioned before about, we're seeing what you have been seeing and others who follow the IceHogs pretty much, in the last couple of weeks as he's really, grown and matured. Going to his debut, going to his debut last earlier in the week against Colorado. What surprised you about his debut?
I think one, from a minute standpoint, I thought it was really cool that they just threw him right into, important power play time. And like you said, you kind of just teed it up. That's something that I've been seeing a ton. He's been running, him and Kevin Korchinski basically switch off running your first and second unit, which is pretty great privilege as far as power plays. So that was surprising, just in the sense that, they felt confident to throw him in there. And even against a team like Colorado, having guys like McKinnon bearing down on him, that was pretty impressive to see. Other than that, I think it was just really great to see him. His skating has been interesting to watch this year. And it's something that I've had a lot of different, thoughts about as the season's gone on. And he's definitely, I think, showcased more and more his skating abilities. And it is also, important to remember too that it's still his third year in North America and his first pro year. But I was really, I would say, pleasantly surprised by how much he was really skating and hustling down pucks on Monday night. There were a couple times I think back on that power play where he kept it in along the boards, maybe when he started that play more in the middle of the blue line. And that's not something that you were probably seeing 3 months ago. So that was really cool to see and just happy for him. He's such a fun, loving dude, just loves playing hockey. And it was fun seeing all those quotes kind of go around, get a little virality on Monday morning because he just wants to play. And it's all about trying to get a win. And I know how much badly he wants to be in the NHL. So I think it was a pretty cool moment to see him get that call up.
Yeah, you can see his personality. It's like really infectious at the age of 19. It's like it's amazing. So,
and it says a lot too, considering he hasn't been home in a few years. He, English is not his first language. He's figuring things out as a 19-year-old living in, Rockford, Illinois. That a lot of people would, I don't want to say struggle to figure out, but just have certain growing pains with as a 22-year-old American that's been playing in North America for years and years. So definitely proud of the work and season that he's come in to get to Monday night.
All right. So Dana, before we let you go here, because we won't take up your whole evening, we could talk Ice Hogs all night. We have this thing, new segment here on the Rinkcast,
baby.
Trivia Time.
Let's
and
go.
so Andy usually asks
17 seconds.
Yeah. Andy usually asks a trivia question. And tonight, because you're on the show, I thought we'd go Rockford themed. So
okay. Boy.
And it's not just for you, it's for the Bard and Jimmy O'Malley there too. So I've got 3 Rockford IceHogs questions for everybody. Dana, if you know the answer, let Jimmy and Bard struggle before you show your knowledge here. So question number 1, who has the most points in IceHogs history? By that smirk, Dana knows the answer.
Martin St. Pierre.
No, Bardo.
I don't know.
He was on the team last year. He was a former first-round pick of Chicago.
Jeremy Marin?
No, it wasn't Marin. I saw him get like a hat trick in Milwaukee last year. Oh gosh, what was his name? I'm not going to look.
You want to help him out?
I'm going to be so
this
mad.
This is bad. I don't even know if I'm 100% certain. I'm thinking of like 2 different names.
Okay. I'll give a clue. So he was viewed as the second line center for the Blackhawks for the future for a long time. He played with Rockford. He played with the Hawks, Vegas, back with the Wolves, and then he came back to Rockford and had 3 goals, I believe, in his return.
Brandon Peary?
That's correct. Brandon Peary.
Okay, cool.
214 points for the Rockford.
I think I was at that game because it was in Milwaukee. He scored like 2 goals in the first
hat trick.
Yeah, I was at that game.
Yeah, pretty awesome. All right, question number 2. Who has the most goals in IceHogs history? His name might have already been said.
Martin St. Pierre?
No.
Jeremy Marin.
Jeremy Marin. He has 90 goals.
How am I 2 for 2? And I think I know the IceHogs least out of the 4 of you. This is not right.
I feel bad for not doing well.
Sneaky Hogs fan.
This is the hardest question of the 3. Who has the most games played in IceHogs history? He played 5 seasons for the IceHogs in between 2 different stints.
It's not new Ring of Honor member Brian Bickle, is it?
It is not, but nice plug for Brian Bickle.
I like the 2 stints thing, yeah.
Yeah, I remember he had 2 stints. I saw him score an overtime goal in Rockford a few years ago.
I will also say it's not retired number Corey Crawford.
Does he have a cup in Chicago?
What's up?
Does he have a cup in Chicago?
He did appear in 3 games on the 09-10 team.
Oh.
But he played 79 games with the Hawks in 2010-2011. That's the most of his NHL career. He played with the IceHogs in 07 and 08, 49 games.
Is it? I don't know if he had a. Is it Boland?
It is not Dave Boland.
Is it Brookbank?
It is not Sheldon Brookbank.
Oh, I remember him in that.
He
Time.
played.
It's not Marcus Kruger.
It's not Marcus Kruger. It's not really a guy who like you would think of off the top of your head. He played 72 games with the IceHogs in 15 and 16, and then 66 games with them in 16 and 17. He was the captain, I believe, at one point for him.
Oh,
I was at a game. I know he got shown the door early. He was running out of hot water in the showers that night.
It's not Rob Klinkhammer. He's 8th.
You know what I'm doing right now, Dana? I'm like trying to remember the mural in the.
That's
because at the bottom it says the captain. Yeah. I'm like, whose name am I missing?
He was the 5th round pick of the Blackhawks in 2004. He played at the University of Wisconsin before joining the IceHogs, and he played 9 games for the Norfolk Admirals before he played his 49 games with the IceHogs.
Wow. He's
back when the affiliate. So that was in 06, 07.
Yeah,
he was in Norfolk.
He played 9 with Norfolk. Yep. He's 40 years old from Eau Claire, Wisconsin.
Ooh. I'm trying to think of just like 2010, 2011 Blackhawks.
He was on the 10 Cup team?
He was on he played 3 games with them that year, but the next year he played the full games. Next year he played 79 games, 2010,
Trevor
2011.
Riemsdyk?
It's not no, it's not Van Riemsdyk.
Oh man.
You guys give up? It's Jacob Dowell.
Oh
wow.
Yeah. Jacob Dowell has, and I made sure I wrote it down. He has 340 games with the IceHogs, the most ever in 5 seasons.
I remember him. Yeah. I forgot about that.
Jacob Dowell. So, all right. I
0 for 3 and
hard ones.
And then a 2 for 3.
Well, I'll make them easier. Next time Dana's on, we'll make them easier. Yeah. We'll be like, who was the AHL All-Star this season? Kevin or All-Star Game MVP.
Wasn't Dazar, I know that.
No.
He was a little busy.
Yeah. All right. Any final thoughts for Dana before we let him go?
I got one for Dana.
Okay.
You mentioned the AHL trade deadline this Friday. Any scoops from Rockford we should know about? A little movement before playoff time?
Not that I don't have any. I haven't heard anything specifically, but I know that it seems like it could make sense to try and bring someone in, especially with Chicago still has one more call up to use coming up the rest of the season. And I think as far as depth goes, it certainly couldn't hurt. We'll see what Bernie, what Mark Bernard is dueling on and working the phones up until that point. But I know he's always, looking to add or make moves. So that'll be exciting. And I think also, I wonder how much the Ratu move kind of, takes away almost a little bit of the pressure for that too, because really you get a top 6 forward that's hopefully going to make a pretty immediate impact. We'll see come Friday night, but that almost feels like the big acquisition even before all the smoke clears.
And is Ratu, because I know in the AHL they have like a veteran, you can only play a certain number of veterans per game. Does Ratu count towards that or no?
He doesn't, no. Okay. And it's actually, the Hogs have been up against that for most of the season. You get basically 5 vets and then 1 exemption for the entire season. Campbell Fitzgerald has been the exemption for this year, but at times when they've got Mayhew, Cini, Sanford, Baddock, Joey Anderson, Athanasiou, those are 6 forwards that all can't play in the same game. So, it's been, I wouldn't really say a rotation. Usually, guys like Cini and Anderson and Athanasiou are certainly in there, but Brandon Baddock, who I think is a great, bottom 6 guy with a lot of size and some pretty good speed too. He's been a casualty of that a few times this season.
Awesome. Well, if anybody doesn't have anything else for Dana, we'll let you go. Enjoy your evening, and we thank you again for being on the podcast. We really appreciate it,
guys. Absolutely. This is a blast. Anytime you shoot me an email and I'm down, and I'll see you guys in Rosemont in April, right?
Yeah.
Road tripping out. All
I'm
right.
going to try to make it.
Or Rockford will go on a run. They'll host.
There you go. There you go. And
I'm excited
an
about
All-Star Classic next year. That's going to be a lot of fun in early February.
Where are they going to play that at before we let you?
That'll be at the BMO Center. They're going to do the All-Star game on Tuesday night and the skills comps and everything on Monday night. So first time in the Midwest in a while.
Exciting.
I worked the All-Star Classic back in 1998 at the On Center in Syracuse.
Oh, the War Memorial, baby! No way!
Oh my God, that was a fun trip. I was working for the AHL back then, and if you actually go look in there, you know the thick yearbook that I don't know even know if they still do that, but they have a thick yearbook that they put out every year with all the stats, etc. So you probably go into their archives, but if you look in the 1997-98 season, my name is in the front of it because I edited like almost the entire book. I had to read every single thing. I mean,
oh my God,
yeah,
that's that building is so. I think that building's so cool. You have that's the one with the press box, right, where you're basically just ducking and.
Oh yeah. It's as old
climbing a ladder. Yeah. Oh, it's awesome though.
Yeah,
that's great. But yeah, we'll see you. Come on out next February. We'll hook you guys up. It'll be fun.
Awesome. Thank you again for your time, Dana. We really appreciate it.
Guys. Yeah, of course. Good to see you guys. See you soon, Jimmy.
Absolutely. Can't wait.
Dana. Appreciate it.
All right. That was Dana Gray of the Rockford IceHogs, a guest of the rink here. Now it's back to the usual suspects here. Let's switch gears to the Blackhawks. Bardo, what do you think of their hot start as of late? They've had, I shouldn't say hot start, their hot play. They, aside from the loss against Colorado, they had not lost a game in regulation in 5 before that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's something that that I know I touched upon. I think everybody else did back on our last podcast, was that it almost seems like after they made the trade for Seth Jones, everyone can just breathe a sigh of relief. And I think Nick Foligno kind of said everything out loud that, everyone was thinking. But this team got the weight of the world off its shoulders because those first 2 games off of the 4 Nations tournament was, a complete disaster. Then the trade happens, and then all of a sudden, what do they go 3-0-2 or whatever it is in their next 5? I mean, you could see in the way that they, the body language, the way that they're playing, and how everything is. I mean, everything is positive, and you're starting to see the fruits of KD's labor over the last couple of years. I mean, just look at the last game. I mean, what they kept focusing on is that 10 guys under the age of 23 or under. So, I mean, for anyone who doesn't think this rebuild is working, just look no further. It is working. So, and this is just 10 of the guys, and they have a treasure trove of other guys, and then draft picks on top of draft picks. So so yeah, I mean, I really attribute a lot of it to, getting the distractions out of the room and just focusing on hockey. And now guys can kind of, like, the deadline's passed, so we don't have to worry about whether or not Donato's going to be there. So all of that, I think, is just factors into it.
Jimmy, what do you got?
I mean, I raved about the Seth Jones, Spencer Knight trade last week, and it just feels like with each passing day, this trade somehow gets better. It's not just how good Spencer Knight has been, who has just been lights out. He hasn't given up more than 2 goals in a game since being here in Chicago. He's in the back, in the videos that we see of him talking to the team, he seems just so energetic. He naturally looks like a leader. And hearing the comments from Foligno being like, yeah, the distraction's gone. Like, he didn't mince words at all. He was like, yep, the distraction's gone. And I just appreciated the honesty. I love that this team, it doesn't beat around the bush. Players don't beat around the bush. I think that, again, as Bard was mentioning, that's why they're playing better. They don't have to skate on eggshells. They can just skate. And another thought that popped in my head, do you think they would have called up Levshunov if Seth Jones were still here?
No.
I don't think so. I think they would have kept Levshunov away from him.
Yeah.
But he gets out of town, and they're like, you know what? Let's bring up Levshinov. Things are better in the locker room. And yeah, it's just the vibes are so much better. This feels like a borderline playoff team with the way they're performing. And maybe that's bold, but I mean, look at like teams like Vancouver and Calgary. Like Calgary feels like great, and Vancouver feels like they're free falling. Blackhawks, like with how the vibes are, you'd think they went from bottom feeder to playoff team in 2 weeks.
I don't remember which game it was, but something that's sort of symbolic of everything we're saying is that I think, seeing a guy like Landon Slaggert go and stick up for a teammate the other day, where I think I don't remember if it was Bedard or somebody else who took a shot, and then Slaggert ran in and just dropped the gloves. I think it might have been, was it Teravainen? Somebody got pasted.
No, it was Nazar got ran, and it was
yes.
Doc dropped gloves.
Yeah. And it was Doc. Okay. So, I mean, look, you don't think that was just a coincidence. I mean, that's just part of a team coming together and just knowing that, these guys like want to be here and want to be here for the long haul. So, I mean, that's kind of a symbolic thing to see that.
Even I know today's 312, so like Chicago's area code, the social media presence the team has now, like they're having fun doing funny things, and they did like fun games on their phone. They didn't do that when Seth Jones was here. Like none of that happened during the Seth Jones era. And it's just, as Ray would always say, it's addition by subtraction.
Yep.
Like not only are you losing, like, yes, he was a good player, but if you're always complaining, like eventually you just bring the vibe down, bring that room down. And now that he's not here, I think it's a great vibe, and hopefully they can string some wins together and build confidence. Like Connor Bedard put on his social media today, him in his Winter Classic jersey, and he was pointing to the crowd, and then it said home. It was just the home logo. Like he wants to be here. He wants to win. And I think Spencer Knight saying, I don't care if we're in last place or if we're going to win games. I think that's just a change in mindset too.
Yeah.
And being around guys your own age, like all the young guys like being around the young guys. Alex Vlasic said it a couple of years ago about Jonathan Taves and Patrick Kane and how he kind of shrunk to the back and just kind of, deferred to them. None of that's here anymore. Like Lucas Reichel's father, whose name is escaping me on the roster, he was having a great time in the social media things. Like the guys who are still here want to be a part of this and want to make it better.
Yeah.
And so I think that's a big reason of why they're playing better. And
yeah, I mean, I'm sorry. Go, Sean.
No, you're good. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, like, we know Foligno is like the leader of the team right now, but I think you're starting to see like who is next in terms of the leadership, between Knight, Bedard is probably going to be a leader, maybe not the most vocal leader, but he will lead by example, if anything. And like Levshinov, the way that he, carries himself. I mean, these guys are going to be leaders. So I think that's important.
Okay. I wanted to go around the league here for a minute. Jonathan Taves had a follow-up to his Vanity Fair article saying that he wants to come back, but he doesn't want to come back in Chicago. He resumed skating in Arizona recently, but he doesn't think there's going to be a pure barometer to where he's at until he starts skating with NHL players. A, do you guys think Jonathan Taves will come back? And B, should he come back?
I can start with that. I think he wants to. And the thing about pro athletes is if they want to come back, they're going to do everything in their power. And as long as he can show skill, I think he can bring a team to the table of a contract. I think a team that makes a ton of sense for him, whether he comes back during this season, I doubt it. I give it like maybe 10% chance. But like this season and the season beyond, I think Winnipeg makes a ton of sense. It's close to home. They need center depth. Maybe he can come in next year and be like, hey, like I'll play with the Manitoba Moose. Give me a 2-way, 1-year contract. Manitoba plays in the same arena as Winnipeg, so he doesn't have to really move and like stay with the AHL team as much. And I love Taves. I've always loved his play. He seems like a hard-headed, great player, and I wouldn't tell him no. I mean, he's so talented and so determined. I'm not going to sit there and tell him he can't. So I think he will.
Bardo, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think he will. I think he'll attempt the comeback. Whether he makes it or not is a different story because I don't know enough about his health issues. Obviously, separately from this, he does have a history of concussions. I don't think that has anything to do with what he has gone through the last couple of years, but there's always that out there. But focusing just on, his current illness and just coming back. Yeah, I mean, look, I think he's going to come back. And like Jimmy said, pro athletes are wired that way. And so I think he will definitely make the attempt. Where I have no idea. If he doesn't want to go to Chicago, that's fine. There's probably no room for him anyway. They've moved on. So I think, look, if he wants to go to Winnipeg or any other contender, God bless him. So I hope he does come back.
Yeah, I'm selfishly, and I hope he doesn't come back because I just want him to. I want that image of him always being in the Blackhawks uniform. It's kind of like Michael Jordan on the Washington Wizards. I try to block that out of my memory because for the fond memories and all the joy I had, I always think of Jonathan Toews on the Blackhawks. And he scored a goal in his last game with the Hawks. Like, I just want him to ride off into the sunset on that note. And then he can come back and be like a brand ambassador or do whatever he wants with the organization. But I don't want to see him like playing fourth line minutes for the Toronto Maple Leafs. It doesn't.
You don't
do
think Blackhawks and Paul Coffey or Doug
No.
Gilmore?
No. Or Bobby Orr and the Blackhawks? No.
Yeah.
Neil Fleury. The list goes on and on.
Yeah.
All right. Another topic around the league. Eric Tulsky, the general manager of the Carolina Hurricanes, made probably one of the worst trades in recent history, acquiring Mikko Rantanen in a deal with the Colorado Avalanche. And then Rantanen got there and said he didn't want to play there. Is Tulsky on the hot seat after this season? Because last year he also made a controversial deal that screwed up the chemistry of the Carolina Hurricanes. Bardo.
He should be. If he's not, he absolutely should be. I mean, if we look at how the trade unfolded, Dallas wouldn't make the trade without the guarantee that he was going to sign an extension. Why didn't Carolina do that? It makes no sense why they rolled the dice and did that. It is not that different than what happened with the Jets when they made the trade for Hassan Reddick and the Eagles. Different sport, I get, different circumstances, but it's really the same principles. He absolutely should be on the hot seat because every year Carolina is also one of the better regular season teams, and they've also, struggled in the postseason. They can't get out of the conference finals. So, yeah, absolutely, he should be on the hot seat. And this team, we might be getting close to a team getting blown up. Carolina might be one of those teams. So,
Jimmy?
Yeah, it's hard to defend this move, especially giving up a guy like Marty Necas, who is absolutely thriving in Colorado on a really team-friendly deal. It's like 2 years, $6.5 million. He has another year after this. He's thriving with McKinnon, but let's be fair, anyone would thrive with McKinnon. I give him props for getting value when he realized he wouldn't retain him through next year. I think Stankoven, I saw him when he played with the Texas Stars, and I've seen him this year. He's great. He's a really good player, and they got 2 first-round picks and 2 third-round picks, I believe. But I agree with Bard, and I said this in the chat, like, you traded him for Rantanen with the express purpose of re-signing him for a long-term deal. You didn't talk with his agent before the trade. You didn't talk with Colorado before the trade. It's like, hey, what's his interest in signing long-term when this trade is made? That's my first priority when the express purpose of my trade isn't, oh, we're going all in this year, we're getting the best rental. Like, if that was your express purpose, then this is a completely different conversation. But the purpose was, I want him in the building for 9 playoff runs, and he doesn't want to be here. Plus, after he came out and Rod Brindamore came out and made those comments, Rantanen's camp came out and basically denied the whole thing. So it's an icky mess. So I don't want to put him on the hot seat, but this is bad. This is not good man management. You did okay getting Stankoven. I think he's going to be a very good top 6 forward, but this is a stain. This is a bad stain.
And
it's an experience.
And let's thank our lucky stars as Blackhawks fans. remember Tulsky was interviewed for the job that Kyle Davidson got.
Yep.
Imagine having that guy running the organization right now. I know, it makes me question what Carolina's thinking, and I'm so thankful that the Blackhawks went with Kyle Davidson, the internal candidate, to be their full-time general manager. That was huge.
Yeah. We got our 3rd round pick in that trade just for taking half of Rantanen's deal, and everyone lost I remember everyone losing their minds about it, losing Taylor Hall and retaining half of Rantanen. Like, what are we doing? Like, it's like somehow we're one of the winners of this trade. Like, I don't know how.
We definitely are.
Blackhawks did basically nothing, and they're a winner in this Rantanen deal.
For sure. Another thing around the league, former Blackhawk Peter Mrazek got his first start, I believe, with the Detroit Red Wings tonight against the Buffalo Sabres. Right, I believe they're up 3-2. And the Wings need a win. They've dropped 5 in a row and now have fallen out of playoff contention. 6 in a row.
Oh, yeah.
And now, do you think we'll see Patrick Kane in the playoffs again before he retires? Or do you think Kane's going to retire after this season? Bart, or Jimmy, go first. Jimmy,
I guess I'll go. I don't think he's going to retire. I also don't think he's staying in Detroit. I think he signed a 1-year deal.
Yep.
Kind of with the express purpose of, I think this team is going to compete. They brought in Tarasenko. And it hasn't really worked out. He's also had a pretty rough year. He has 3 points today, by the way, so he's having a great game today. But he's had a really rough year. Outside of the power play, Patrick Kane has been really bad. Like, one of the league's worst in terms of just analytics. That being said, someone's going to see the value in him. I don't know who. But I could see him wanting to stay kind of close to home near Buffalo. It could be Toronto. It could be basically anyone out in the East that's a competitor. But again, if they don't make the playoffs this year, I think he's gone. Not retiring, but I think he wants to actually make a playoff push with a team that's probably more proven in the playoffs. Probably Florida. Florida makes a ton of sense. Or Tampa. I could see him, especially Tampa. Tampa needs bomb 6 scoring, and he would fit right in trying to score there. So, yeah, not retiring, but I think his time with Detroit will be done.
That's the team I thought of was Tampa also. Tampa, as you said, Florida, I think makes a lot of sense as well. I don't think he's going to retire. I think he's going to try to latch on with a contender. Maybe somewhere on the East Coast, like you said. I think that makes sense. I don't think he's going to get a second run with like the Rangers. It feels like a very Islander type move, where they would go for somebody that can maybe pass his prime, sell tickets, etc. Another team I could see also is the Devils. I mean, they seeing them wanting some veteran leadership. They got a lot of young talent on that team, and they've been bitten by the injury bug this year. But I think he could be a secondary scorer, power play guy. That could also make sense as well.
Yeah, great comments by both of you. I think the only reason I think he would stay in Detroit for another year is because he said, and he's been on record a couple times saying that he wants to play with like his friends, and Alex DeBrincat and him are pretty good friends. So that's the only reason I can think of him staying in Detroit. Because I think the New York dream with Artemi Panarin, they've seen that story, they've seen how that movie turned out, and it didn't turn out well.
My quick
question is, does Detroit want him back?
That could be it too.
Yeah, that's what I was about to say. It's like, will Detroit run it back next year? Like, the Yzer plan has been kind of strange.
Yeah.
I mean, this offseason, they paid a ton of money to Tarasenko. He's been awful. They let Wallman go with the second-round pick for nothing. Like, that is some of the worst man management I've ever seen. And at the trade deadline, their only move was bringing in the entire contract to Peter Mrazek, who was having a really tough season post-injury.
I believe statistically he was the worst goalie in the NHL since like January.
Yeah, that's post-injury for him, so he's probably not 100%. And then bringing in Craig Smith, who is having a great year. He's a playoff warrior, but again, you have to make the playoffs to get a playoff warrior to be a playoff warrior. For Joe Veleno, who's having a really bad season, He's coming to Chicago. This is the other big trade for the Blackhawks. This trade deadline, probably that trade, the Weber trade, and the Knight trade were the big three. I keep trying to understand that trade. They brought in Mrazek, who has another year of control. I kind of get it, but now you have 3 goalies. You didn't trade Lyons to a team like Edmonton, who could have overpaid for him. Sure, you say with getting rid of Veleno, it's more like Mrazek for $2 million instead of Mrazek for $4 million. But still, it's Mrazek. Hopefully, you're getting Mrazek of last year and earlier this season, but that's never a guarantee. It's just I can't wrap my head around the Yzer plan here. No, I remember what Steve Dangle said after the trade went down. Yzerman just seems to be good at doing an abundance of nothing. Just a ton of moves that do nothing. It doesn't move the needle. Like, oh wow, they got Andrew Kopp. Kopp didn't move the needle. Got Tarasenko and Kane, didn't move the needle.
Yep.
It's exciting for names, and then it just doesn't translate.
What's interesting is that we look at Tampa and look at Julian Brisbois and what he's done since he's been promoted, and they haven't missed a beat, and they just keep rolling. And yeah, look, they had a little bit of a dip maybe last year before, but right now they're right there at the top of the East. The Eastern Conference, they're right there, and so they're a contender. So, and this is also with them losing Stamkos, and they can't pay everybody, but they've managed to figure it out. So,
and they're always going forward at the deadline. Tampa, they reacquired Yanni Gourde at the deadline. Like Bardo said, they didn't pay Stamkos, and that move. I know he's on a heater now, but it looks like it's the right move not to pay Stamkos. So, yeah.
Paying Gensel or Stamkos is a genius move. And I loved his comments talking about his draft picks. He doesn't have a first-round pick till 2028.
28, correct.
Yeah, and he basically just said, what are draft picks when you're competing? Like, what are draft picks when you're trying to win a cup?
Right, exactly.
Like, he basically said, like,
Mark McNeil, or who I'm surprised nobody guessed in our Rockford trivia. Mark McNeil, he was down there for a long time.
I knew he was part of a trade that sent him to Dallas, so I knew not to mention that. I think it was part of the Sharp trade.
I think it was part of the Sharp trade.
Yeah. No one mentioned it.
Oh boy.
One last thing around the league here. Aaron Ekblad suspended for 20 games due to violating the league's performance-enhancing drug policy. Do you guys think that Florida knew about this ahead of time, and that's why they acquired Seth Jones? Or do you think Seth Jones was just like a luxury pick for them, that they felt that bettering their team on the blue line was the way to go? Bardo.
I want to say no. I don't think they knew about it, but sometimes these things just kind of happen in strange ways, or at least we think about it on the surface. It's a strange thing, but like really behind the scenes. So I want to say no, because look, I don't think there is a plan to re-sign Ekblad anyway. So when you get someone like Seth Jones, you're getting cost control, and yes, he's not as good, and it's somebody that's going to be probably anchoring your second pair. But I think they had this in mind. Yeah, I mean, I think they had this in mind, knowing that Ekblad was going to leave. So now it's like, okay, now this kind of like further cements that they could just remove themselves from him.
Jimmy?
Yeah, I agree with Bard. You don't pay for a first round pick and your top goalie prospect for a guy specifically because you just think someone got suspended. I mean, this guy's under contract until 2030. Seth Jones, that is. Ekblad's an unrestricted free agent this year. He had injury troubles. It sounds like the PED came from injury recovery, like he took some substance during injury recovery that was not allowed.
He rubbed some cream on his knee, like Gary
Something
Sheffield.
like that, yeah. But, but yeah, Seth Jones is a future move. I think they wanted to have Ekblad in the first pairing, Jones in the second pairing, and then walk in the next season, elevating Jones to the first. Now this just moves up the timeline. I feel like it's just putting on the conspiracy glasses, just being like, oh, they made this trade because someone's going to get suspended. It's like, you can't really predict that kind of stuff.
Does the Ekblad suspension deter the Blackhawks from pursuing him in free agency? Anybody?
I would say no, but it lowers the cost.
Okay.
I think if you're Chicago, you're going to Ekblad's camp and like, hey, what we're willing to give you AAV has kind of dipped because of this PED thing, because it comes from injury as well. Like, hey, we have injury concerns. If you needed PEDs just to be healthy, I'm worried. Then again, I like Ekblad. I like his two-way game. I think he'd be the opposite of Jones. I think he'd be the two-way defenseman that you can honestly put on your second and third pairing and he wouldn't complain, and he'd be effective for a young team, especially since he's actually younger than Jones, which is hard to believe. But yeah, I'm not turned away from him, but I'm definitely like, hey, the contract value has dropped a little bit.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Okay. All right. Guys, before we get out of here, any parting shots?
I kind of want to talk about the Donato trade or lack of Donato trade. I think being on Twitter during the trade deadline, a lot of talk was about not trading Donato. And I me and Andy, we were kind of on the not trade Donato bandwagon. And then he went on this tear. Bard talked about getting 2 first-round picks. And then Kyle Davidson said, hey, the price is a first-round pick. We'll start there. I think at that point, I definitely went, okay, like if we can get a first for Donato, I'm in. But as the trade deadline passed, I knew a lot of Blackhawks fans were upset. It sounded like some people just wanted him out of the building to get rid of him. I definitely disagree. I like what Kyle Davidson did in the Donato situation. I think it showed a ton of intangibles that only veteran general managers have. He set the price. He didn't move. And that's good. You want a general manager that doesn't move. You want a general manager who goes, hey, here's the price for getting this guy. I'm not moving. And because I'll re-sign him. I'll try to re-sign him if you don't give me what I want. It's kind of what he did with Hagel, and he got 2 first-round picks for it. So I like it because, as Kyle Davidson said, if you watched every shift, the video that came out, which, by the way, it was incredible hearing he had a heart procedure done during the Four Nations face-off. I had no idea about his condition.
Still got the Jones Spencer Knight trade done.
That was wild.
Which apparently has been talked about since February.
Yeah, before the Four Nations, I heard. But yeah, I mean, what a warrior he is. I can't give him enough credit. But yeah, but going back to the every shift video, I think his exact quote was, "We're not going to trade Ryan just to say we traded the guy
for a mid-round pick." Yep.
Yeah, he's like, I'm going to get a first, or I'm going to try to re-sign him, and I think that's great. And another thing, I was talking about this earlier in the chat. It's like, at some point, even as a rebuilding team, you can't trade every guy that has value. You can't trade everyone that's playing better than the level of dog crap. Like, you got to retain talent. At some point, you got to say, thank goodness we have talented players. We want to reward them for being talented by giving them contracts and letting them stay on the team. I like how Davidson handled the deadline. Would I have loved to get out first for Donato? Absolutely. It seemed like a seller's market. I thought Washington was going to give him. I mean, they gave up a second for Anthony Beauvillier. I thought that was wild. But yeah, if you don't get the first or second, stand pat. You know, if you want to bring this guy back, again, he's 28. Sure, he's probably going to regress to the mean, but the mean for him is a 30 to 40 point bottom 6 plugger player. I like Donato a lot. I don't think he's going to regress. He's not 34. I liked bringing him, keeping him. I liked how Kyle Davidson went with it. I give KD an A+ for the deadline. Freeing up $9.5 million, getting rid of Jones and Mrazek for this offseason, I think is a bigger win than even getting a first for Donato would have been. So that's my thoughts on the Donato thing.
Bardo, what do you have to say on Donato?
No, I totally agree, and I think the one concern though that I do have with Donato is he's got a history of health issues. So to me, that just sort of is in the back of my mind. Like, you know, if he starts to get the injury bug, you know, but it is what it is. But I totally hear you, and I agree with you, Jimmy. Actually, is that, you know, at a certain point you got to start to keep guys. I think, when Bedard went public and said, we really like him, or I really like him, he's one of my closest friends, that could have been something that was certainly, heard and factored in. It's like, hey, the future of the franchise, this is a close friend of his. Maybe we need to kind of keep him or put a steep price on it and see if somebody's willing to pay it. But, look, I don't, he's not going to be overly expensive. I love his versatility. I love his leadership and his character, and the guys like him a lot. So yeah, I mean, look, I'm totally fine keeping him. I would have been fine if they got a first round pick for him too. So to me, I think, like you said, Kyle, I thought did a great job, with all the trades that he did.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, I agree with both you guys. I also think one thing on Ryan Donato, he's a hardworking guy. He brings 120% every time he's at the rink. And I think being not an older player, but kind of younger, it sets an example for guys like Bedard and Colton Dock and those guys who just – you see a guy who's in his 20s still bringing it every day, bringing it 100% every time he's at the rink. And I think that's a good example for the young kids.
Mm-hmm.
So,
and I'd also like to add that I saw his father play for the Olympics, the Ray LeBlanc Olympics. He was on that team. That's how old.
With the mic drop there.
Arnold's just dropping his age with this episode with the AHL All-Star game in Syracuse. And
I'm 48. Hey, I'm 48. I'm proud of it.
Man, he owns it.
Hey, I own it.
All right. Any parting shots before we get out of here? All right. I have one thing I have to say. I have to say congratulations to Andy's daughter, Bailey, on her 15th birthday. That was today. That's where Andy's at. He's celebrating his daughter Bailey's 15th birthday. So happy birthday to you from the rink. And if nobody has anything else, I will say goodnight for the evening. I'm Sean Fitzgerald. Goodbye from Jimmy O'Malley and the Bard. We'll see you the next time on the rink.